We'll just take a quick moment of silence. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Rotarian Mike Robertson to give our invocation today.
It's always an honor to be asked to deliver a Rotary invocation, especially so during the peculiar time we deal with a pandemic and a presidential election. Those of us here at the War Memorial just stood and said the Pledge of Allegiance, as we do at the beginning of every Rotary meeting. And I'm going to assume that many of you participating on Zoom also recited the pledge as we did. Now, the pledge, is originally written by Francis Bellamy in 1892, included a word he eventually decided was too controversial. The pledge, as initially adopted, read, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation with liberty and justice for all." Now, over time, words have been added. My flag was changed to the flag of the United States of America. And then in 1954, under God was added. Now, the word Francis Bellamy had originally considered was equality. And he left it out because in 1892, so many were opposed to supporting equality for women, for blacks, and others. Having the pledge as he originally wrote it, liberty, equality, and justice for all, in 1892, was thought to be too controversial. So, how about today, in 2020? Do the words we state in this pledge each week have the power to change our attitudes and our behavior? I find it interesting to think that patriotic Americans during all these years could seriously believe there could be justice without equality. What will it take to finally include the word that was intentionally omitted 128 years ago? So as we ponder what we believe, let us pray we may receive the wisdom and the courage we need to live our lives humbly and joyfully. And now let us thank God for the food we're about to eat, for those who raised it, for those who transported it, and for those who prepared it. We are truly blessed. Amen.
Thank you, Mike. Again, I'm extremely pleased to welcome you virtually and in person here today. And whether you're in person or online, we expect you to have a quality experience. A quick note about our upcoming Tuesday programming. On October 20th and 27th, our speakers are going to be joining us virtually rather than speaking in person from Memorial Hall. Therefore, we'll not be hosting a lunch program here in person for the next 2 Tuesdays. Please join us on Zoom or YouTube from your homes or offices on those particular dates. Also on Tuesday, November 3rd, I'm sure everybody knows there's something happening on that particular day. We will also not be meeting in person or virtually, as we will be postponing our meeting for that particular day. We ask that you take that extra time to go out and vote. Thank you also to those who came out on this past Saturday to help clean up with the Johnson's Park Neighborhood Association. It was a great day to get outside and help the community. After a brief hiatus, our Rotary People of Action feature is back. Rotary People of Action is now being written by members of the RCM Writers Collective. Every other week, a member of the collective will write a profile on a Rotary person of action. Members of the collective include Rotarians Mary Bolich, Joe Caruso, Kimberly Kane, James Madlin, and Barbara Velez. If you're interested in writing a profile of a Rotary Person of Action, please let Barbara know. They'd love to have more sign up for this group. Tomorrow, we will have our first discussion of our fall book series, Things That Make White People Uncomfortable. Got my copy here. This is written by Michael Bennett. It's a quick read and it's not too late to sign up. So if you're interested, please contact the Rotary office to join in the discussion. Those of us who tuned in to the Thursday snack program learned about Milwaukee Film Festival this past Thursday. Rotaries are proud to be an annual sponsor of this event. And this year we're sponsoring the film, We Don't Deserve Dogs. This is very true. This heartwarming documentary asks why humans have earned the unconditional love that dogs provide us. This kaleidoscopic film moves from a former child soldier in Uganda to a small town pub in Scotland to a dog walker in Istanbul. We do have some free ticket vouchers and discount codes. So ask Michelle or send her an email if you'd like to utilize one of those. This Thursday, we will welcome fellow Rotarian Wendell Willis to discuss how Milwaukee Public School Foundation is helping the district overcome the pandemic and virtual schooling. Join us at 11:30 a.m. On Zoom to socialize with your fellow Rotarians prior to the start of the program at noon. For those who are missing interaction with your fellow Rotarians, these are a great way to connect with everyone via Zoom. That program always opens up a bit early for additional conversations. Now is a great time to join Rotary. If there's someone in your network that you think might be interested, we believe it's the perfect time to introduce them to our work and programming. Consider inviting them to a program or a virtual Tuesday meeting or one of our Thursday snack programs. Connect with them and let them know how Rotary has enriched your life. And as a COVID special, all of the admission fees have been waived through the end of the year. Finally, if you're joining us with Zoom or YouTube today, please use the chat function to stream in those questions. And now it's my pleasure to bring up John Ferguson, Business Development Director with Findorf, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, President Darren. It's my unique pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Megan McGee. Megan is co-founder and the executive director of Ex Fabula, a nonprofit that connects Milwaukee through real stories. Megan is bilingual and has an MA in literature in Spanish, spending a year living in Mexico, inspired countless stories. Through her work with Ex Fabula, over 1,100 individuals have told stories on stage at Ex Fabula StorySlams, and thousands more have told stories in other forums, including their workshops. In 2018, she received the Public Allies Changemaker Award for her efforts to build a more just and equitable society. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, Megan McGee.
Thank you. First, we're gonna adjust to make sure everyone online can hear us okay. Today is a bit of an experiment. Let's see if I can move this without losing any cables. And I brought some boxes, so y'all online, hopefully you are not looking up my nose. One of the many things we've learned. How am I doing? Am I still connected? All right, thank you for the tech assist as we call many audibles this day. Primero, quiero agradecerles por apoyarme. I want to thank you all for supporting me. Personally, I was an ambassadorial scholar back in 2003, 2004 in Mexico. So thank you so much for investing in me. I've been able to use that work. That was the first half of my master's degree I did down in Mexico. And Ex Fabula, even today, is still doing bilingual programming, thanks in part to the skills I developed while I was down there. So today, we're going to explore some connecting while distancing. And since technology can be a powerful tool for doing that, when used well, I'm going to try to demonstrate these tactics. And we're doing this in person and virtually. definitely an experiment. So you'll see me kind of going back and forth, staring at y'all and staring directly into the camera. That's a YouTuber trick. Actually, it existed way before YouTube. I was told recently by someone who was older than me and felt I was being cheeky. For the online folks, a couple guidelines. We can all see right now a lot of your cameras are off. That is totally great. Obviously, you can feel free to eat or drink, just like the folks in the room, but please be fully present. Please do stay muted, although you can use the chat. If you have any comments, either you love what I'm saying or you hate it, you can also use reactions. You can give me a thumbs up. There's no thumbs down. If you don't like it, you'll just have to comment in the chat. Probably you'll be best using the speaker view. You can private message me, although it will come up in front of everyone here. So just be aware, it's not actually so private. I'd love for you, if you're not eating, if you'd like to leave your camera on, I would love for you to do that. And I will tell you why slightly later. In fact, around halfway through, I'm gonna ask that everyone consider turning their cameras on so we can all see your smiling faces for a moment. And then finally, please help me with the technology. Whenever we're doing new technology, you know how it goes. It always works perfectly in the dress rehearsal. And then during the actual production, there are unforeseen issues. Well, that could happen here. If I'm talking about a slide and folks can't see it, or I've left a poll up on screen, please let me know, because we're all learning. And really, ultimately, group support is how we learn these new things and survive these challenging times. It's kind of like when I was a server in a restaurant, I'd forget the salad dressings or whatnot, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm new here." I did that for 6 months. We can do that too, right? We can ask for help and continue to be new and be learning. So first of all, what is Ex Fabula? I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And you can see how complicated it is to be doing all these things at once. That's okay. Oh, and I'm somewhere in the middle. Rewind. Okay, so you can see here, I'll just move us over a little bit. So Ex Fabula's mission is to connect Milwaukee through real stories. And what that looks like in practice. Well, back in the day, can you remember when we had events in person? We did that. Those were some of the venues. We deliberately traveled all over the city to hold events where people could go to neighborhoods they've been before or go to new neighborhoods and have new or familiar experiences in these different spaces. There you can see us at Turner Hall for a really big season finale event. We have all sorts of community partnerships. This is one about birth stories, using storytelling to address the discrepancies in birth disparity. And we would do storytelling workshops. All of this with a very small staff. There's a couple of us. There's some of our storytelling coaches and a whole bunch of volunteers. We're kind of a collective. We started out completely grassroots and kind of grew organically. So what does all of this have to do with connecting virtually? Well, our first virtual workshop was March 21st. And since then, we've done 64 public workshops and slams and hundreds of internal trainings and meetings. And honestly, we've made hundreds of mistakes. I promise you, every way you can screw up technology, we have done it. And we have learned from them. And along the way, we've really thought a lot about how we create these brave spaces. So I want to share a couple models that we found useful. And then we'll talk about some ways that you can use these as well to consider how we can connect even while we're distancing. So all the changes in the past 6 months, I think they've pushed us out of our comfort zone, right? I've spent a lot of time in the learning zone. For example, applying for the PPP, figuring out how to do virtual events with ASL, sign language interpretation, discovering things like the speaker view doesn't work if you're doing a language with no sounds. Trying to navigate all those things. Even, we've also spent some time in the panic zone. When daycare was closed, I was multitasking and my toddler drank watered down plant fertilizer. She's fine, but I basically poisoned my kid due to my own inattention and desire to do the impossible. I was definitely in the panic zone that day as I was Googling and reading things about brain injury and nervously calling poison control. Also, the day after taking a socially distanced walk with a friend, getting a call from her, hearing that she had been exposed at work and having that moment of panic. And then there was that fun time at the end of April where I wasn't sure if we were going to make payroll after having a bunch of projects canceled. So lots of time in the panic zone. And I'm pretty sure that I am not alone. So let's find out. I'm going to attempt to use the poll. Everyone online, if you can go ahead and click in one of these options. For the folks in person, I will say for everybody online, this is anonymous. For y'all who are here, I can see you, but I promise I won't tell anyone what you said. Have you been in the panic zone more than usual in the last 6 months? Can you raise your hand for each of the options? So one, I'll read all 4 of them. So it's yes, 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 a bit more than usual, about the same, or I've been in the panic zone less than usual, actually. So Brave, if you can let me know how you're feeling. So first option, have you been in the panic zone more than usual in the last 6 months? Try as the unclenched fist to type yes, yes, yes. Okay. Like about 5 or so in here. Okay, how about a bit more than usual? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, okay. About the same. 1, 2. And then I've been in the panic zone less than usual, actually. Nobody in this room. So actually, I think that matches up fairly well with what we're seeing online. So some people are about the same. Maybe you always have a lot of stress in your life. Good for you. Maybe you have better coping skills than I do. Also awesome. But there are plenty of us that have been in the panic zone a bit more than usual or a lot more than usual. And I think, let's see, here. I'm going to go ahead and pull that poll down. So if that is the case, how can we help each other to cope? Because ultimately, coping is something that sometimes is done not by an individual, but with the help of others in a group. So I have some general tactics I'm going to share. Let me pop back to. And you get to see behind the scenes today, right? Because we're projecting my computer, so the view of, so that's why you get to see behind the curtain. Let's see. So tactics to help folks cope. I'll go through a few. And honestly, if I had time, I would put you in breakout rooms because we really believe of the wisdom in the room and that everyone here would have great ideas to add. So just the thought for whenever you're doing stuff online, the more interactive, the better. But for folks that have folks that are online, if you have ideas as I'm talking, please throw them in the chat so we can add those as well. So the first one, set clear expectations. Hopefully you noticed that I did that for the folks that are online, right? I even gave them instructions about the camera, about how they can use the chat or not. Has anyone here been in an online meeting where someone's asked a question like, is it okay for me to drink coffee? People don't know unless you tell them. We have clear rules, right? Like everybody knows here, you're allowed to get your lunch and eat it while I'm talking. But in online meetings, people don't always know that. Sometimes even just setting clear expectations can remove some anxiety for folks. Another thing, address fears. I did a poll, it was anonymous. Doing anonymous polling not only is interactive, but it's a great way to hear from people without them having to out themselves. For some reason, people are a little bit more shy online. The next one, remove barriers. Hopefully, keeping it engaging by using things like the polls in the chat. But actually, another barrier is this physical barrier right here. Let's try something. Hey, everybody online, can I ask you to turn your cameras on just so we can see your smiling faces? I want to tell everybody about something. Not only is it nice to see other faces and feel less alone, but there's been some research into something called the propinquity effect. It suggests that we consider ideas more seriously when we are close to people. So if you have some people that are farther away and you're not really seeing them, you could be hearing their ideas on a phone call or in an email, but you might not be really paying attention to those ideas in the same way. It also means that when we have distance between us, if we don't constantly try to connect with each other and create spaces for real connection and not just meeting agendas, that kind of closeness will stop happening. Relationships will not be built. Tension will build. If you've read Crucial Conversations, there's even talk in there about how things can happen with remote teams. There's some additional challenges. So, hey, look at everybody. It's nice to see, oh, we got people outside, we got people in their offices. Let's say that even if you were going to do some online meetings, what if you all turned your cameras on at the beginning or the end of the meeting, just to wave hi to each other, see how you're doing, and so forth. See everyone's virtual background, see their dogs in the background, and so forth. So whenever someone is sharing an idea, if you can have them turn their camera on, great. And if you can find little opportunities to see each other's faces, it is more reassuring than I even thought was possible. So if you want to hang on and continue waving at everybody, awesome. If you are eating or you just want to hide, hey, choices are good, right? So finding those opportunities for people to see each other. I know in our Ex Fabula programs with teenagers, nobody wants to turn their camera on. But we've been encouraging it at short periods of time, just saying, hey, can we all turn our camera on now and give everybody, do we all agree to this thing? Do we understand the instructions? Can we give each other a thumbs up? Those little moments help us to connect in a way that is very meaningful. Back to the PowerPoint for a sec. Another tactic to help folks cope. Normalize learning and mistakes. Did y'all hear the part before where I admitted that I might make technology mistakes? If I do that, then if someone else makes a tech mistake later, maybe they won't feel like it's a problem. Like we can normalize having a culture where it's okay to make mistakes and ask for help. I think right now, when a lot of us are doing new things and we're not as confident about them, it can be very reassuring to be in an environment where it's okay to say, I need help. I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. Or I need help. I'm having a tough time mentally. Which takes us to the fifth point, use personal stories to show that we aren't alone. So you saw me do that poll about stress. Is it kind of nice to see, however you feel, that you're not the only one that feels that way? Did anyone here, can I, by raise of hands or by anyone whose face I can see there, did anyone hear one of my panic zone stories and go, yeah, I've been there? The story about the toddler in poison, the story about payroll, applying for a loan. As you hear those personal stories, it creates space for others to admit their stories. So for example, shortly after the death of George Floyd, I was in a team meeting and the energy was just weird. This was an online meeting, but I could tell from my staff, I was like, okay, next item on the agenda. They just weren't really interacting or putting a lot back. They weren't responding. Even online, you could kind of see there just wasn't much energy or eye contact. And part of me said, well, we should push on through the agenda. But part of me said, maybe we should stop and just mention this. So I said, hey, actually, can I go on a tangent? Let me just put this out there. This is what I said to the team. I said, the news about George Floyd and all the other things related to the movement for Black Lives really is affecting me. And I wonder if I am not the only one. Don't feel you have to share anything with me, but that news is definitely in the back of my mind and it's affecting my energy and my mood. How are y'all doing? How are y'all coping? And that opened up the floodgates. All of a sudden the team was having this conversation about frustration, about the stress. I have 3 women of color on my team and there were definitely some big feelings there. Until I shared a story though, and kind of started talking about my own experience, I don't think they felt comfortable bringing it up. And there are probably people you work with that are also dealing with challenges, caring for sick family members, homeschool, their own health concerns, feeling isolated, missing your friends. I'm an extrovert and I want to see people. I miss people so bad. And being able to put that out there and hear from others that I'm not alone, that we will get through this together, is really crucial for my coping. So you can tell these personal stories. You can share your personal story and then ask someone else how they're doing. And it could literally potentially save a life, because you never know who really needed to share with someone and they just didn't really have the opening. So we've been applying all these tactics to our Ex Fabula workshops, our StorySlams, even our team meetings online, trying to create openings for people to share their stories, trying to say, how can we continually remove barriers for folks, address their fears. And so I just want to challenge all of you. I think a lot of times we're using a lot of new technology to connect with folks, and it's really easy to just have a program and not use all the tools, not think so much about how do we create a brave space, how do we create an environment, how do we see each other for a moment. And so I want to encourage you, think about how you can do that. Let me just stop sharing for a sec and see. No one in the chat yet. If anyone in the chat has a comment, a thought on how you can put these practices, put these concepts into practice, feel free to add that. Also, when we go into Q&A, I'd be interested not just in questions, but other examples of how you are trying to innovate during this time to help people feel close despite all the additional barriers from technology. Because ultimately, a lot of the ideas Ex Fabula has are crowdsourced from volunteers, from audience members, comments on surveys that at first seemed ridiculous, and then we realized, oh, maybe they have a point. Maybe we should continue changing something. So we'll get to, if any of those come up, we can share those with the group. I do want to note, though, that since we have done so many workshops and slams, one way that folks can learn is by participating in it themselves. And we have a couple things coming up. We're doing some affinity spaces where people of a shared identity can come together for a workshop. That's speaking of things that, things that white people don't want to talk about. There are also things that people of other identities may not feel comfortable talking about in mixed company, shall we say. So we're creating those spaces. We also have slams coming up, like reimagining norms. We're doing some work with sculptures and stories. I don't know if anyone here has gotten to take a jaunt down Wisconsin. Very good for the mental health, to experience some art. And we have a Black affinity space. And then we have our radio show. So in all of these programs, we're trying to amplify underrepresented voices and stories and break through some of the stigmas and challenges that are out there. Sometimes if you hear a story where someone else is bravely speaking about their mental health, maybe that's the thing that helps you do it as well. And we can cut through stigma. So let me see if there's any questions or comments in the chat. Oh, but finally, why don't I just pull this one up here? Finally, let's stay connected. Here's my contact info. If you saw anything here today and have an idea on other ways that Ex Fabula could be better leveraging this online platform to connect folks, I would love to hear it. Like I said, we're crowdsourcing a lot. Or if there's any other things that you want to find out about, I'm usually in my house, as are many of us. But right now, why don't we go back? No comments in the chat. We're pretty quiet group today. So why don't we open it up then for some Q&A. This can be questions about Ex Fabula. These can be ideas you have for storytelling or leveraging the power of technology combined with storytelling to connect us. I would also accept any parenting advice you have or advice for a small nonprofit that's trying to stay alive and stay relevant during a time of continual change. Nothing like trying to write grant reports or grant requests saying what kind of programming are we going to do in summer 2021, as if that can be known. So any questions for the folks in the room or online? Whatever questions asked in the chat, I will just speak it out loud so that everyone can be sure to hear it through these two microphones. So, yes. Yes. Yes, I have mentioned slams multiple times and I haven't really explained it. I really didn't touch a whole lot on what Ex Fabula does. Thank you for that question. So story slams are events where people put their name in a hat and then share true personal stories. Some of them are competitive, some of them are not. Speaking a little bit to Stephen's question, or Stefan or Stephen, the problem with online, I'm sorry for pronouncing it incorrectly once and right once, hopefully. Our ultimate goal is to connect Milwaukee through real stories. So some of those programs, there are story slams we do that are meant to explore a very specific topic. Like we just had one about, that was related to an art exhibit at UWM, and we were exploring like Americanness as a concept. Who is American? Who feels American and why? Very deep. There are other events that are about love, because hopefully it's something that we've all experienced, and it can be really great to hear other people's experiences and have that magical feeling of, whoa, that is so different from my life. That is amazing. And maybe at the same time, wow, I have totally been there. I have seen strangers, this is before COVID, obviously, but I've seen strangers go up to each other during a slam, like after one person told a story, I've seen someone else go over to them and just start an organic conversation. I've also seen family members enter into conversations where they were like, I had no idea that that is what you were going through. So it should feel like entertainment, but secretly we're trying to help people deepen relationships, connect with each other in deeper ways. And maybe secretly we can all learn from realizing what someone else's reality is. Hopefully I caught both those questions. Thank you. Sure. So the question is about, given our current environment of depolarization, how do we have conversations in civil ways? And the main way we do that is by not having people make blanket statements, but instead speak to their experience. Because, you know, my opinion is one thing. I can say, all parents should always do this. You know, that's an opinion and we can definitely argue about that. It's different if I say, here's something that happened to me. Here's how I handled it. Here's how I felt. In that case, I am literally the expert because I'm speaking from my own experience. Everybody is an expert in their own experience, and you really can't say, no, you didn't experience it like that. You really, I find that even when there are people where we do not agree on a whole lot, I can hear their story and learn more about their specific area of the world. And sometimes maybe even have a more complex understanding of how things work. I did a project at high school where I was talking with teachers, and at one point I heard a story about fights that were happening because students had cell phones. And I was like, wow, yeah, the policy should definitely be no phones in the classroom at all. And then I heard a story about a specific student who was a young mother who had not very reliable childcare. And every now and then, this student would get a call and she would need to go and pick up her baby or be fearful that the baby was in harm's way. And at that point, my understanding got a lot more complex. I started to see the nuance. So part of the hope is, through sharing these stories, we can enter into the nuance and stop speaking in blanket, this is good, this is bad. So that's the hope. It is a slow process. How can we use stories to break down barriers? Hopefully, I've touched on that a little bit in my last response. I think we focus a lot on the telling, but equally important is the listening. And how often do we have opportunities to listen to folks who are different from us in certain ways? So are there certain paths you go in, certain people you talk to all the time? Are there other folks that you don't get to hear from as much because of where you live, where you work, where you worship, etc.? Listening to those different viewpoints can really be a powerful learning tool. What led you to do this type of work? Steve says, I think because I am interested in theater and in languages. I've always been interested in complexity as well as stories. And I like that storytelling allows us to hold sometimes contradicting truths together. Also, obviously, I was an ambassadorial scholar. I'm fascinated by language and culture. I feel that stories are kind of the intersection of all of those things. And then, if you can believe this, I also have a background in process improvement. And so somehow that's a pretty good thing to have if you're working in a super small, innovative nonprofit. I like new things. I like experiments. I think that kind of all came together. And I was very lucky to get to do this work. And then finally, how do we make an online video meeting not leave participants feeling more disconnected? Yeah, a lot of people do end up turning off the camera. I will say, even right now, can you see that this is a little bit challenging being both in person and virtual? Because I can't give all of my attention to one platform or the other. I do have to switch back and forth. If you're doing an online meeting, I think some of the tactics we've found really helpful. If there are breakout rooms where you can put people in small groups, that's great. Especially, I'm an extrovert, I think out loud, which is dangerous, but a lot of introverts need some time to process, or maybe they're more comfortable initially working through some ideas in a small group. Use those features. Give people the space to see each other, not as a tiny square, but as a bigger square. Maybe they'll be a little bit more vulnerable that way. So doing the breakout rooms can be very powerful for an online meeting. I think also spending time to use the poll, the chat, create opportunities for engagement, and maybe even let people know, when is it okay to just turn off your camera? And maybe are there times where it's better to turn it on for a specific reason? Yeah, we do forget to look at the camera. One other thing, everyone, if you're working on a laptop, they're all low, get a couple of boxes to stack up under the laptop to put it more at your eye contact. And if I wasn't using this microphone, I'd be getting in real close. I'd be getting in real close so everyone could see me. And I'd even put nice lights around my head. That's what I do at home. I spend a little bit of time creating the environment, trying to create a friendly, cozy environment. It seems silly, but even considering, you put your back, like your office is at work, you create your space, right? We got to do that online too. All right, I know I'm coming up on 12:40, so let me see. It looks like one other question. That's a great question. So to paraphrase, and correct me if I get this right or wrong, information is meant to be objective and clear and fact-based. What we're trying to do is personalize things and have each person speak from their own perspective. Is that useful? Well, I think it depends on what your goal is. So if you were teaching CPR, do you probably want people to have very clear guidelines on what they're supposed to do? It shouldn't be me saying, I don't know, once I saw someone who was choking, so I thought I'd try this. Like, no, that's not very helpful there. On the other hand, sometimes you have a list of, instructions that someone's supposed to follow. Sometimes a personal story can help people to remember those, to understand why something is important. Let's say that you tell everybody, I want you to do X, Y, Z. I was just telling you, with employees, if you have, or coworkers, it can be good for you to share a story saying, hey, here's something that happened to me, here's how I'm feeling. And that will then open the door for them to share their feelings too. I tried to give you a couple examples, right? The examples are more likely to stick. speaking of fact-based, there's a lot of great research about how stories are processed in the brain. I won't have time to share that with you, but if you want to see it, I do believe these things go hand in hand, right? If you want someone to change their behavior, maybe they need to understand your side of the story. So it's not that there's only one way we can communicate. I'm not necessarily an expert in the information side of it, but hopefully if people can become more effective storytellers, they can use that tool when it's the appropriate tool to use. So let's see, do we work with schools? We've done several partnerships with schools. Right now, I don't know that teachers have any time to come to any extra workshops about doing online engagement. I think there's a lot of learning as they go. I've definitely seen that in my K-3 daughter's classroom. Can you imagine them doing online education? She doesn't even understand what school is. As John says, turning off the camera does not mean you aren't listening. Yeah, that gets to culture. What's the culture you create? And then finally, this would be great to use with scholarship students at one of our semi-annual events. Yeah, we are continually experimenting with how best to use the tool of storytelling. It all ends up being custom and separate because, you know, use tools in different ways. You need very fine, not every screwdriver works on the same screw, right? I see more and more questions come through, but I want to do a time check because actually this would be pretty crucial for online programming. You need to respect people's time. And you also need to know that if you have a 4-hour gala every year, you cannot do a 4-hour online gala. It does not, you need to trim it down. People's attention for online programming is shorter. So can I throw it out to Michelle? Do I need to wrap it up or can I answer one more question? Okay, sounds good. Sarah is asking, you all did a Deaf Slam. What opportunities and challenges did that create? So we actually won a Mandy Award for our first Deaf Story Slam. It was the first in the state of Wisconsin. It was an amazing project in that the whole project was led by a team of community members, which is really great. That's what you should do, right? If you're going to work with a community, we had deaf community members that were telling us what they wanted, what it should look like, and so forth. Of course, the way that they wanted things to work wasn't necessarily what we had written in the original funding requests. So for example, I said, all right, we're going to do some storytelling workshops with the deaf community. We are going to have ASL interpreters working with Ex Fabula coaches and do these workshops. And the deaf community members said, oh, I think the coaches should be deaf people. And I said, we don't have any. Does anyone want to train as a coach? And we trained people on the fly. It wasn't part of the original scope, but I think part of Ex Fabula's work is really listening to the community, whether it's easy or not. And along the way, we discovered just because things work one way for the hearing community doesn't mean it's just that plus language. There's little cultural elements. And in fact, speaking of opportunities, we stole things that we learned there to use in our regular programming. These days, do you know how we clap online at our StorySlams? We do it a couple of ways, but we use the kind of deaf sign for applause. We also use different features, the different reactions on here. But I think as we went along with the Deaf Slam, I learned so much about space that will benefit people beyond the deaf community. I learned things about how do we make a space visually accessible? Because there are plenty of people that are not deaf, but might have other needs. So, of course, there's so many things we learned with the Deaf Slam. Maybe I'll just mention one more. A challenge that it created is a good thing. Now we have deaf community members that want to come to other programs. And I don't know if you've looked up what it costs to have interpretation, but it's, it's expensive. You need a couple people at a time because they have to take turns. If you've ever dealt with interpretation. So it's just what we wanted to happen. We wanted the deaf community to feel more connected and to come participate in other events. Now that's happening. And we're transitioning to how is Ex Fabula funded, cobbled together. We have memberships. We have people that make individual contributions. We have ticket sales. We have corporate sponsors, some grant funding, and then fee-for-service work. Fee-for-service work, corporations, schools, nonprofits, community groups contract us to do all sorts of programs. So if you're interested about that, shoot me a note or look at xfabula.org and maybe consider, I don't know, a gift of a membership for someone. Could be a good way to support a local nonprofit. And then finally, from a quick look at the website, it looks like our slams are in the evening. Yes, I wonder if daytime business stories would garner interest. You know, hard to say. People are pretty busy these days, but if somebody wanted to host it, let's chat, let's figure out a way. We've certainly done programs within companies where they were looking at their own culture through stories. So thank you to everyone online for interacting with me, being willing to show us your smiley faces. If everyone wants to wave to the crowd here anymore. Oh, I don't know how dangerous. Yeah, I better not turn it around. If anyone wants to come over here and wave to folks later though, you can see each other. Thank you for having me here today. I hope you all stay well. Please, in the next week, find an opportunity to tell someone else how you're doing. Not just fine, but like something that really happened to you, whether it's hilarious or tragic or somewhere in between, and maybe invite them to share a little as well. Our mental health needs it more than we even realize. And so we all have the power to create those telling and listening experiences for each other. So thank you.
Megan, thank you so much for being with us today. It was great to hear you speak. In honor of community leaders like yourselves who speak to our club, we will be making a donation to the YWCA of Southeastern Wisconsin, whose mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Join us next Tuesday as we welcome the immediate past president of Rotary International, Mark Maloney, who will be joining us remotely from his home in Decatur, Alabama, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. Rotary and the United Nations have a shared history of working towards peace and addressing humanitarian issues around the world. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, it's appropriate to reflect on the critical work that has been done and we are doing together. And remember, if you parked in the lot, make sure you take your voucher with you to the lot, and please practice social distancing on your way out. Appreciate everyone being here today. This meeting is adjourned.